Even though I spoke a little bit before, now I have some prepared words. As I mentioned earlier, this is a Seudat, a meal, not only a Malava Malka, the Saturday night meal. It's a meal celebrating life. As my brother mentioned, we're children of the Shoah, second generation. And who knew that there would be children after the Shoah? Many people gave up not only on Judaism, but gave up on life. And we're, as my brother said, 10 and going strong. So, in last week's Torah portion, when Abraham meets Melchizedek, he thanked Abraham and then he thanked God, which was a mistake on his part, and I want to begin and make sure that we begin by thanking God. It's a blessing we say, Shechiyanu v'kimanu v'gyanu l'zman hazeh, that we thank God that we reach this point when we do a mitzvah. We say to add that to the other blessings. When you blow the shofar, you say it many times, that you thank God that we It looks bad if I can't keep kids quiet. I just want to mention that when the speaker stops speaking, it's a universal sign for parents to get the kids and make them, quiet and take them out. I don't know if you figured that out yet. It took me a few number of kids to do that. So, okay. We say this blessing, Shechiyanu v'kimanu l'zman hazeh. Just what's the blessing about? Just thanking God, Shechiyanu, that we existed, that we lived, we survived, and reached this point. Do you know, thank God, my wife and I had the pleasure, the excitement, and the challenge of having 6 children behind her so far. And each one is a challenge. Each one is an excitement. Each one has its own set of rules. Each one is different. And I thank God for those differences. I had a teacher, a 9th grade Rebbe, I went back to see at YU High School. And I asked him, how's the family? He said his wife had a baby. And he said, I asked him, which number is this? Because when I was in his class years ago, he was on number 7. My brother had him 5 years earlier, he was on number 2. He says, oh, this one is number 1. I look at him, number 1. He says, yeah, this one is number 1, because everyone is number 1. And if you count them all, you end up with 9. But 9 number 1s. And he taught me a lesson. He taught me a lot of Talmud also. He taught me about love for Judaism. But he also taught me a major lesson about children. And we have to be thankful for them. But before that, after we thank God, I like to thank my mother for coming, for all her help. My brother Ephraim and his wife Debbie and their family. I'd like to thank my in-laws for coming. And I'm going to stop there because there are about 10 or 15 other relatives who I'm going to thank privately, and I'm not going to mention your names because I'm going to forget one of you, and I have to live with you for the next 30 to 50 years, so there's a good rule about that. But thank you all for coming from far and near, friends also, and relatives, especially in this troubling time in America of travel. I'd like to say thank you to everybody here joining us in the Simcha. As I told some of the teachers who came from the DMJA, they couldn't stay to eat. I told them just the fact that you walked in here during our Simcha and joined us. And all the people in Des Moines who called and said they couldn't come because they're out of town or they're busy or whatever it might be. It's just a beautiful thing to be in such a community of people. And I can't even say enough about that. You don't even know how wonderful you all are. I grew up in New York, remember, right? And when I joke about New York, I'm serious about it. It's not just New York, it's a pervasive thing in this world about sometimes people forget. You come to a place like Des Moines, and they tell me it's the whole entire Midwest, and people are so nice. And I'll tell you, the one thing my father taught me is about being a mensch. Whether I am a mensch or not is a separate issue, but he spent a lot of time teaching me that. And my children have great challenges here in Des Moines. Whether it's friends, education, everything else. But I'm really happy that they're here to grow up in a place of menschlichkeit. And I didn't do any of that, even though I hope I'm adding, my wife and I are adding to the Des Moines community. But really you gave that to us. That's what I noticed first when I met Rabbi Berg 2-3 years ago, when I spied out this place to see if I should come or not. And also what I found out from day one. And even when people don't behave 100% in the community here, other people take notice and they say, you know, that's not the way to behave. That's not how people behave. Because the community as a whole believes in behaving like mentioned. And I really thank you, and I thank you for sharing in the Simcha. And I also thank you for the environment that you've created for my children, something that you can't get. You can't just buy, you can't figure out it's either there or not. Thank you very much. And then I want to give a message to my daughter, which is a message to the entire community, I think, and an explanation. We're told in Proverbs, Chanoch lanar al pi darko, that an individual should educate the na'ar, he who is not educated yet, could be a child, could be a 90-year-old, al pi darko, according to his way. That everybody's unique, as I mentioned before, everyone's number one. And that's the philosophy that I have when it comes to learning with people, educating individuals, and trying that when bringing up children. And every one of my kids are unique. Ahuvi is like a doll, a princess, a smiling individual, one who brings great joy to all of us. I'm still trying to find a button somewhere where you press to make her smile, like automatically you pick her up and she smiles and brings great joy to us. Shmuley is an exciting 3-year-old. That says it all. You can eat him up. Shlomo, you know, the secret got out because he started school this year. And you know, some of the secrets aren't that good. You know, I call Shlomo a great kid, but the biggest challenge that there is. And I love him for it. Wait till your bar mitzvah, Shlomo. A beautiful boy. And then we have Miriam. Miriam is in a world of her own, who surprises us at every turn about what she knows, what she perceives. Miriam comes to me last week and tells me about one of her brothers who did something wrong to her, and she's learning about not speaking bad about other people. So she comes to me and says, Tati, you know, someone hurt me. I was amazed. And I'm trying to figure out who, because what am I going to do about it, right? And she wouldn't tell me. But it's a boy. And it wasn't Shmuley. We only have 2 boys in the house. So, but that a 7-year-old could recognize that, you know what, you don't just fib on people. You don't just slander people left and right. And then we have Blimi. I don't know if I told too many people about this, but Blimi's most like me. In many different ways. Don't worry. You know, the beard only comes for us guys. And she is the most strong-willed of everyone. And there's so much wonderment and so much excitement and intensity and potential for this young lady. And I'll only continue at your bat mitzvah in a few years. But you too, we love having you around. And even with the challenges, you should know that your parents love you very much. And then we get to Chaya. Chaya's our first, not the best, everyone's the best. Chaya was like an angel growing up. Till the other kids came around and she didn't get all the attention, and then, you know, life was, you know, the honeymoon was over. But I'll tell you something about Chaya, and then I'll tell you a message to Chaya, and I apologize if I'm a little bit long, but hey, I'm paying for the mic, as Ronald Reagan said in the debate many years ago. Right? Remember that? No, but please indulge me because it's important. Chaya is a person who told me the following. I was living in Tamarack, Florida, and I got into this Des Moines fever. And it took me about a year to put together the kollel. And in the interim, I left the shul job and spent 9 months back in Miami Beach. And those 9 months went very quickly, thank God, because we lived in a 2-bedroom closet, literally, with 4 or 5 kids. And when we were moving to Des Moines, Chaya says to me, listen to this, a 8 or 9-year-old, it was so short living here in Miami Beach. It must be that Hashem wants us to get to Des Moines faster, to do more great things for the Jewish people. She still has faith that we're doing something worthwhile and good. That's good. That's what kids should have. But the perception that we have to be concerned about other people. What can we do for other people? The way she deals with other people. She runs I don't know if you know, she runs a summer camp in our backyard for little kids. If I can finally convince her to go to summer camp herself, sleepaway camp, right, she'll be on track to be the head counselor eventually. I'm going to tell them that when I register her the first week, because that's the type of person she is. And a person who's out there is also, she's an individual who has tremendous modesty. And you know, in some Orthodox circles, they don't have bat mitzvahs in a traditional sense. If you notice, at 2 o'clock in the morning when my wife asked me what the language should be on the invitation, I said, say 12th birthday. You know, because some people, you know, I'm being politically correct, some people have it at 13. You know, in Florida, a lot of people have their bat mitzvahs when they're 70, you know, because they never had it before. We all know that a Jewish girl, when she turns 12, becomes an adult. No matter what you have a celebration, whether you have a celebration or not. But her sense of modesty in every way. And I want to give her a blessing based on the Talmudic statement of one of our mothers, Rachel, or Rachel, one of the matriarchs. The Talmud says she was an individual who stood for modesty. And so was her great-grandson, Shaul, the first king. And the Talmud says, what was her modesty? The story of what King Shaul was, he had been told that he would be the king, and someone, on arriving home, someone asked him, well, what happened? Anything happened today? And he didn't run around telling everyone, guess what? God anointed me, he's going to anoint me the king of Israel. It was a big deal in those days, right? Not a political office only. He was modest about it. And the Talmud says he got that from Rachel, from Rachel. Rachel was modest too. What did Rachel do? Rachel was supposed to marry Jacob first. And the father, Lavan, switched them before the wedding. And she was covered up. And that's why the law is that before you get married, you should look at who they're bringing under the chuppah. That's why you have a badekin. It's one of the ceremonies to look before you cover the veil, so they don't switch her on you. And what did she do? Jacob and her knew that there might be a problem of Lavan switching. So they made signs up. A sign, you know, high sign, high five, a certain symbol to know whether it's Rachel. And what happened? The father switched. And if Yaakov gave that sign to Leah, her sister, and she didn't respond properly, what was Yaakov going to do? He was going to leave her at the chuppah, at the altar, and it would be over. What kind of devastation would have happened to Leah? Rachel knew that all the 12 tribes would come from Yaakov. And she had no way of knowing they would come from 4 different women. And she figured there'd probably be only one wife. And she decided not to allow her sister to be embarrassed in public and give her the signs. And that's how Yaakov ended up marrying Leah. And she didn't know a week later she would end up marrying him also. Why is that modesty? My mentor, Rabbi Zweig, explains modesty. It's modesty because of the fact that modesty is not just in how you dress, it's how you behave. Whether you become the center of attention, whether you can walk into a room dressed very modestly, but draw the most attention in the world to yourself. Chaya is very uncomfortable with drawing attention to herself. And we're told the best trait that a Jewish woman should have is kvuda bas melech penimo, that the sense of modesty. That doesn't mean you don't go out there into the world. You know, my wife is an accountant and worked in major firms in Baltimore and Miami, right? Just because you have a certain set of beliefs, it doesn't mean that you're out there and involved, that you're not involved in the world. You're involved as much as anyone else. But there's a certain way of behavior. And that's a way that I think Chaya has tried to emulate, and that I hope my wife and I continue to show her. Modesty not only in dress, but modesty in behavior, modesty in life. Not to draw attention to oneself. Because in that way, God gives his blessing to women, to Jewish women, and therefore we all know, and this is not, you know, all those who know me, know that I'm telling you the truth, that the backbone of everything Jewish are the women. From the women who told Sarah, who told Abraham what to do, exactly how to run the household, to all the matriarchs, to Miriam after leaving Egypt, was the one who celebrated God's salvation of the Jewish people. And throughout history, the saviors of the Jewish people began with the women. And the fact is, Chaya, you are now on the threshold of becoming an individual You are an adult now in the Jewish law. And I thank you for all the things that you've done in the past, and I look forward to being there with you and helping you continue on that path. I'd like to thank you again, Chaya, for being a wonderful young lady, the most helpful individual in our home. We give her too much work, too much activity. But I apologize, now that you're an adult, I have to apologize to you for how we treated you. She doesn't look so bad. And I want you to know that your mother and I love you, and just like my mother and my in-laws are there for us, we'll always be there for you. Again, thank you all for coming, and I hope to share many more Simchas together and to enjoy many happy occasions. The one thing that will give me the greatest joy, and I tell all my students at the Federation Melton program, is to give me a phone call 3 o'clock in the morning and ask a question about Judaism. That would be one thing. But really, one thing would be is that you would look to yourselves and your children and instill and inspire yourselves to make yourselves be as great as you can be, committed to Judaism, committed to Menschlichkeit, and to build on all the many years of greatness that this community has, and to become as special as you are and continue that way, that the next generation of children should be just as good and even better and more committed than we all are now. Thank you, and Mazel Tov.